Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 pilot, and welcome to the next tutorial for the iFly Boeing 737 MAX. We've just completed our performance calculations and entries, and we're now ready to prepare the aircraft for pushback, engine start and the after start procedure, which is going to be what we are going to cover in this video. So, first things first, let's go ahead and get our aircraft prepared. So once our external door is closed and the jetway is disconnected, we also must ensure that the flight deck door is closed. From here on, let's go ahead and order GSX to prepare the position for pushback and departure. And while that is ongoing, let's go ahead and do our own procedures. First things first, make sure that the APU is on the bus. If you forget to turn the APU generators on before removing the ground power unit, your aircraft is simply going to turn dark. There is no automatic transition from the generators unless the aircraft is in the air. So, with that done, let's go down into the systems page once again, simulator menu and ground support, and in here we can disconnect the external power unit and remove the 3 chocks around our gears. So, after that we go back to either the terminal charts or to the performance. Normally we'd use the terminal charts over here. So, before we can start our pushback, we must check that our windows and doors are closed. So that includes the flight deck windows, the cockpit door and the external doors. Once all the passengers are seated, we would get a signal by the cabin crew and we would set the no smoking sign, or rather switch, to the middle position to indicate that the cabin is ready for pushback. As a small reminder, if you are operating the windows in the 737, if they're open over here, before you can close them, you must pull that little lever down here which locks the window in place. Only when that is getting pulled, you are going to be able to close the windows like this. Be sure that the windows are completely closed and nothing is in the way here like headset cables, etc. Alright, last but not least, let's go ahead and select the legs page on the pilot monitorings FMC and the takeoff page on the pilot flying's FMC, and now we can go ahead and run the before start procedures. So the before start procedure is fairly easy. You turn the air conditioning packs off, make sure the APU bleed is on, anti-collision light comes on, and last but not least, the transponder is set into the auto position, which automatically activates altitude off. When these tasks are complete, we can go ahead and start our pushback. So let's tell GSX that we are ready to continue the push, and we want to push with the nose facing to the right, so facing south on the taxi lane. Okay, so GSX is prepared. So let's go ahead and release our park and brake. The pushback is going to start, and while the pushback is progressing, let's go ahead and talk about the engine start. So, in general, we don't want to start the engines while we're still in the immediate gate area. Many airports define dedicated engine start points, but in most of them you just wait until you have passed the road that is usually running behind the parking stand. We've got a second road over here that we are also going to pay attention to, so we'll wait until we are beyond this before we are going to commence the engine start. Now let's go ahead and have a quick look into the engine start procedure itself. So, the 737 MAX engines are special in that due to the large size of the engine, the thermal conditions inside the engine can vary significantly, and warm air rises to the top of the engine. Therefore, the blades that are located at the top would become hotter than those at the bottom, which can cause significant issues when the fan blades are rotating at full speed. Therefore, the aircraft is going to motor the engines by a certain period in time, which is automatically calculated from the electronic engine control unit. Now, we are going to see this on the indications, and I will talk you through the engine start as it happens. What's important to remember over here is the maximum time for which the starter is allowed to be engaged is 3 minutes. So, let's go ahead and initiate the engine start. We're starting in sequence 2, then 1. In order to initiate the engine start, we are going to turn the start switch into the ground position, and this is going to open the engine start valve. N2 starts to rise, and at some point between 18 and 24% N2, the gauge is going to display motoring. And this is the so-called bout rotor motoring that I have described earlier. What the airplane is doing right now is that through the suction of the air through the engine, the heat is getting dissipated and all components of the engines are cooled to a similar level. This can take a little while, and while that is in progress, we monitor that oil pressure starts to rise and the N1 starts to rise, and once N2 is at or above 25%, we are going to turn on the fuel. Have a look at the engine valves at the top, and you might see some of them flickering while the aircraft performs an automatic self-test of the systems. Now we are going to monitor the engine start in progress, and we are going to check for any of the following, in which cases we would have to abort the engine start manually. If there is no N1 rotation before the engine start lever is raised to the idle detent, if there is no oil pressure indication by the time the engine is stabilized at idle, if there is no increase in EGT within 15 seconds of raising the engine start lever to idle, or no increase in or very slow increase in N1 or N2 after EGT indication, or if the EGT rapidly approaches or exceeds the start limit. In any of these cases, we need to manually abort the engine start. So engine number 2 is started, and before we go ahead with engine number 1, let's go ahead and add some air conditioning back to the cabin. We do this when it's very hot outside in order to make it a little bit nicer for our guests. And when engine number 2 is stabilized and running, you can do so-called isolated pack operation. What you do here is you turn the isolation valve to close and then the right pack into the auto position. Now the right engine is providing air to the right pack so that air conditioning is applied to the engine, while the APU bleed is still available to start engine number 1. And that's what we're going to do now. So, engine 1 start. And once again, we can monitor the N2 rising. At about 18%, we should start seeing the motoring indication. N1 starts to rise. And now the motoring is in progress. While we're waiting for that to complete, which can take up to 90 seconds, our pushback has also been completed, so let's go ahead and set the parking brake. To do that, press the brake pedals, and then you can apply the parking brake lever. So, motoring is in progress. Once the motoring is complete and the N2 reaches 25%, so now we are going to turn on the fuel, monitor operation of the valves, and here we go. Engine number 1 is now starting up as well. Okay, at 63% N2, the starter is going to disengage. And once the engine is stable, we are going to select the generators on and the APU off. So here we go, 63%. Starter is disengaged, and the engine is stable and started. So with that, generators on, APU off, and before we do anything else, we got to wait until all the ground equipment is disconnected. So we got a tuck, we have the tow bar, and the ramp agent is holding the pin in his hands down there. Now we're just waiting for him to give us the all clear signal, and once that is done, we can go ahead and commence the before taxi procedure. Alright, here we are. Clear signal is received. Before taxi procedure. So, the APU generators, the engine generators are on. APU off. Start switches, continuous. Probe heat, on. Anti-ice, as needed. We are going to keep it off today. On the air conditioning panel, be sure that both packs are selected to auto and the isolation valve is in auto as well. And the APU bleed is turned off with the engine bleeds on. So, moving further down, let's go ahead and select our takeoff flaps. So that's going to be flaps 5 today. Once again, ensure that the engine start levers are in the idle detent, and then we can go ahead and commence the flight control track. If your aircraft is equipped with the flight control display on the system display, you can use this, but most 737s are not, so you might as well just keep this closed and just do the flight control track down here. What we're checking for is a smooth, continuous movement of the yoke, and we want to make sure that there are no obstructions and no strange feelings in the way that the yoke moves, which would indicate any problems with the flight control cables. So before you move the pedals, in order to check the rudder, be sure to hold the tiller tight so that the nose wheel does not skid on the ground. Okay, so once the flight control track is complete, we are going to hit the recall button. We will press the engine button over here in order to remove the secondary engine indications, and then we can read the before taxi checklist, and that completes this tutorial. So, thank you very much for watching. I do hope that you learned something today and that you enjoyed this one. Be sure to leave your feedback in the comments below this video. As always, like, comment and subscribe, and if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and I see you all again on the next one.